morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever it is you are watching us from. My name is Bev Chahonyo, and this is Beverly Speaks. If this is your first time engaging with me or encountering me, I am a podcaster. I am a published author. I've published my first book in December. I am a an HR professional. HR is what I do. People are my passion. I'm very passionate about helping people find their gift. I am an executive coach, and I am a lover of people, a lover of travel, a lover of words. And I'm a lover of conversations, especially meaningful conversations that make you ask thought provoking questions. So today we're going to have one of those conversations. My guest, as you can see her, is an amazing, amazing human being. I'm going to read her bio and then I'm going to let her introduce herself after that. Her name is Ebiere Bolu. She is an A-level economics and math teacher with 16 plus teaching experience in high achieving independent schools in the UK, helping her students get into top UK and US universities. Her vast experience working with children gives her incredible insight into how a child's mind works. She's able to discern what's really behind your child's emotions and behavior, giving you tools to correctly return your child to their authentic selves. Ebiere's passion is to help parents build strong relationships with their children and repair broken connections. She believes that having a sense of purpose and meaning is critical to success in life. She equips and empowers parents to recognize and utilize the unique strengths of the child to raise them to live a life of purpose. Ebiere uses her love and knowledge of psychology, educational theory and practice, neuroscience, and biblical principles to help parents instill discipline correctly and raise children who are emotionally resilient. Ebiere has a master's in educational leadership and management from the University of Nottingham and a BSc in economics and finance from Loughborough University. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, and welcome. That is a
Wow.
mouthful, sis. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be chatting to you again.
I know this has been almost a
Yeah.
year in the making. We started talking about this
Yes.
a year ago, having this
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
First, in your own words, just introduce yourself to my amazing audience.
Thank you. Well, honestly, the first thing I say to anyone who asks me about me is I talk about the fact that I'm a teacher. It's just something I love so much. I went into teaching at 21 and I've been a teacher for about 17 years now. And it's just working with children, seeing them behind the scenes, preparing them for the most important exams they have to take. Just that journey with them is just so powerful. And, I feel like the time I've spent with them has been such a privilege. And I would love people to understand the privilege it is to be walking alongside little humans, which is what they are. They are humans like us, but in the purest, most innocent, beautiful form. And if people understood that, I think they'll be able to relate to them, kind of differently to how we do at the moment. So the best way to describe myself and introduce myself is teacher. Love it. I love working with children. That's really who I am. Sorry, I think you're muted.
Okay. I said, do you see why I brought you here already? The first time I interacted with you was at SOAR.
Yes.
And you were speaking and I was so intrigued, um not just by what you were saying but by how passionate you are. You said the children are tiny humans in their purest form. I mean, wow. Because I think as we grow up, we get a little jaded, a little tainted, a
Yeah.
little almost corrupted by our environment and our
Yeah.
belief systems and our experiences. So we become not as pure. We're not in our purest form as we grow older
Mm.
unless we're deliberate about seeking out that purest form.
Yes. 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 And that's why it's such an honor to be with them and to see them. And I love to see them even when they are struggling to stay in that authentic place and their difficulties, because then you feel so honored to be able to guide them back to their higher self. Just like, I don't know what job is better. And I guess parenting is probably another one that you experience that, or as any kind of primary carer, as an auntie, an uncle, a grandparent, just being around children, it just reminds you something about yourself as well.
Yeah, it does. It does. I think it's important as we grow to deliberately seek out our inner child,
Yes.
and take those moments to dance in the rain or to just
Yeah.
be silly, because I
Yes.
think our ego does not allow us, and that
Yeah.
ego then begins to harden us to the
Yes.
point where people can't see our true selves because, you know,
Yeah.
what will people think?
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you.
How did you get into this line of what you do?
I've always been the, the strong-willed child, the why child, but why this and but why that? So I think because of that, even when there've been things in my life or in people's life, you know how like when you're growing up, you might be expressing who you are, and people around you may not always agree with that. I
Hmm.
was fortunate in the sense that when I expressed my desire to do things, I had parents, number one, that it didn't matter what I wanted to do. I always felt encouraged that yes, I could do whatever. That really helped. And then I knew that I knew that I wanted to work with other people like me. One of the reasons was being in the classroom. I was one of those kids who just felt I could have taught that better. I know a lot of us sit there thinking that, but when I'm sitting there and the teacher's explaining this, I'm like, if he just said that and this, it could have been a lot easier. And I'd explain it to my friends in that way. But as I grew older, I was like, you know what? Education is probably the most important thing that helped change our nation. I grew up in Nigeria, and if you grow up in a country like Nigeria, or to be honest, many countries, you're always thinking about how you can make it better.
Hmm.
And for me, I just felt like it's the humans that will make it better. I was studying economics at that time, doing GCSEs and A levels, and I was like, look, it's the human capital. And if we can improve education and improve healthcare of people, and at that time I didn't really know much about emotional well-being, but I was like, if people were better, looked after, they would build a better nation. And so I thought, what, I'm going to go straight into teaching. If I want to make a change in education, I don't want to be a school owner that doesn't teach children. I want to go
Wow.
into oh, I don't want that. I don't get that. I want to go into the classroom. I want to see it from the inside. I want to see how the whole thing works, so that when I come out and I'm giving an opinion, I'm not telling the teachers what they should do when I've never experienced it like them.
That is so good. Because I think that's where you lose the magic,
Yeah.
when you're no longer connected with them.
Mm.
Okay. So I want to kind of start jumping into the conversation. But first, I want to talk to my audience a little bit. So it's been a while since I did a full on podcast with a guest. And a lot of you already know this, but for those who don't, the reason, well, I last year I struggled a little bit with consistency, and that's one thing that I'm working on. But then one of the things that the bigger project I was working on last year was my book, Hugs from the Father, and that stemmed from my journey of grief. And after losing my father in 2018, I started kind of journaling, and then it became a thing. It was no longer a journal. I decided to turn it into a book, and I published last year. And as I was celebrating that win, December, as I was publishing it, I lost my mom. And I was actually looking through my conversation with you, and I remember saying to you, I am so heartbroken. I think those were the words that struck me.
Yeah.
I said, I am so heartbroken. It was very sudden, and I'm still processing. And I know that sounds weird, but it's one of those things I don't know if you ever get over. We're almost 1 year in, and we talk about her and we laugh about her and we miss her. And then sometimes we cry. And that's really what grief is. Now, the reason why you and I started talking about this last year was because I was talking about how my munchkins, for those of you who do not know, I am an auntie. I am the proudest auntie and the best auntie. I will feed your kids candy and sugar and send them home to you because, why not? I'm kidding. Well, no, I'm not really kidding. And I am the Christmas fairy. I am that auntie who does Christmas big. And I do, even while I'm away from my family, because I don't live in Kenya where my family is, I will send a birthday present to every one of my munchkins. I call them the munchkin crew, and I just adore them. And I had been watching them going through grief with their grandfather, with my dad. And it had been 4 years in. Those who had never met him would ask questions, and those who had met him would give answers. And that's kind of where I wanted to start this conversation from. And then we lost my mom. And that was just watching them go through it was just, if I wasn't already heartbroken because she was my mother, I was heartbroken just by their tears. And then now that I am more aware of myself coming out of the
Mhm.
deeper, deeper grief, I've been reflecting about their different reactions.
Wow.
So there's this one beautiful little girl who she's like my guardian angel. And incidentally, her name means angel. And every time I would break down, like every single time, I would just find myself crying and crying. And she would just be there looking at me. She didn't cry. She would just look at me and then she would say, "Why are you crying again? Is it because your mommy has gone? Is it because she's in heaven?" And she would, so in our language, we call grandma Guku. Is it because Guku has died? And she was just, it's almost like she was always waiting to comfort me. And she would hold my hand, or I would say, Auntie Bubu wants a hug, and she would come and hug me. Now, she was processing in her own way, but she was processing by asking questions. My nephew cried. No, first of all, he just didn't cry at all. He watched us and he would go out and play and he would go out and do things. But I remember the moment when we were now lowering the casket or about to lower the casket into the ground, and he just couldn't. And he was like, "I don't want her to go into the ground." And he was crying. He was inconsolable. He was so close to her. He was so, so close to her and he was so inconsolable. And then there was another one who just, she wasn't talking. She would cry and she wasn't talking. And then there was, I mean, all of them had different reactions. I remember my best friend's daughter. We've been best friends since we were about 12 years old. And she happened to be in Kenya. They were visiting from the US and they came with us, to bury my mom. And she was just so heartbroken. She was like crying. She was, she's a bit older, but then this was also her first encounter with death. And then in an African setting when she's grown up in the US. And then she would just shoot, she would just sit on my lap, even as we were lowering the casket and, going through all that. And she was just crying. And she was, so now that I'm thinking back about it, and sometimes they ask about her, sometimes they talk about her. So thinking back, this is why you and I are here. Gosh, I've
Yeah.
gotten through it without tears.
I know, honestly. And the tears are fine.
I know. I don't know. Sometimes it's just like I want to do just one thing without tears. And then sometimes I just want to sit alone and cry and be engulfed
Yeah.
in the tears. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I just want your thoughts. So I'm just kind of going to go into some of the things that you and I had talked about in terms of
Okay.
why in our society, well, in general, why don't we talk to children about grief?
Oh. Oh my God. It's just, it's such a hard topic. Do we talk to each other about it? Let alone children. So, so many of us, I remember when I was much younger. I think I was maybe 20 or 19 or 18, and my friend lost her dad, and I just didn't know what to say to her. I was embarrassingly ignorant of what to say to her. I didn't even know how to be with her. And
Yeah.
like we don't talk about it enough as well as that. And I was thinking about this. So if we don't talk about it, or don't know how to talk about it, then how are we going to talk about it with our children? A lot of
Yeah.
times we want to, as well as other things, we want to protect the child. So we think that if we don't talk about this very difficult, hard, confusing, painful thing that we don't understand ourselves, then we are somehow shielding them from it, but we're not.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think another thing is very interesting. It's such a good question because grief is something that is part of the human experience. It's not some people's situation. We
No.
all know, yeah, we all know that we and everyone at some point will die. We know it's coming.
Yep.
And even if it's not
Here
the
they
loss
come.
of a person, yeah, oh man, I know. Even if it's not the loss of a person,
Mm,
we talked about the fact that there are other invisible losses that we can talk about them later, but the other invisible losses that we experience throughout our life, where we
yeah.
experience significant grief as well on a different level.
Mm.
But I guess we just don't talk about it because it's so painful. And the normal thing, yeah, the normal, I guess, human thing for us to do when something is so painful is rather than face the pain, we want to turn away from the pain.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't talk to children about it.
Yeah. Um, I remember my father losing his mom, and he must have been in his
Mm,
50s at the time,
mm,
maybe 60s, and he was inconsolable. And I remember my mom losing her mom maybe 10 years before that, and she was inconsolable. And I guess it doesn't matter what age you experience loss at. Um,
yeah,
you're right, you want to shield them for as long as you can.
yeah, yeah,
But in shielding them, a lot of times we then handicap them. We don't prepare them
yeah,
for this
yeah,
world.
yeah,
So,
yeah. Yeah,
okay.
it's no, you're right. The problem with that, when we don't discuss it with children, I know how difficult it is, and there are no perfect words you can use. But when we don't discuss it with them, it doesn't mean it's not happening to them and in them.
Yeah,
All it then means is that we are leaving them to process it on their own because they're still experiencing it
yeah,
even though we don't want to talk about it. So the fact that we turn away from it doesn't mean it's not there. It
yeah.
just means that, unbeknownst to we don't want to do that, but by turning away from it, the child is now processing on their own and
Mm.
feeling alone as they
Feeling
deal with
alone.
this difficult thing. And when you look at it that way, you're like, nah, I don't like you and I, we don't want to be alone when we're dealing with this difficult thing.
Well,
And the child,
incidentally, I do, which is so weird. I actually withdraw completely. I
oh
just want
yeah.
to be alone. And I know my siblings worry about that alone. They're like, "Oh God, she's gone into
Yeah.
her cocoon again." And my
Mm.
girlfriends in Rome, they're like, "Oh God, she's in her cave again." So they
Yeah.
have different descriptions, but it's a
Yeah.
coping mechanism for me.
That's it. And I think that's an important point to touch because there's a difference between being alone, going in that space, and feeling like you are alone. There's nobody. So I should really stress that difference because I'm one of those people. I withdraw and I go into the cave. Absolutely. But you can be in there and know that you're not alone.
Yes, that's
That
true.
if you need, yeah, that if you needed to emerge and deal with this thing together, you are not alone. But
Mm.
when, if you did come out from that cave to talk about this grief and everyone turned away from you because they didn't want to talk about it, then you'd feel alone. And there's a
Yes,
difference.
yes, yes, yes. I love that. There's a difference between being alone and feeling alone. So, how do children process grief?
Mm. Can I just be blunt and say they don't
Oh,
unless we help them? They don't know how to.
okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Because that whole process is like processing your emotions. You don't. You if you don't know, if you don't learn how to, you don't process it. You just cope with it.
Yes.
Yeah, and if they don't learn at that age, which a lot of us didn't learn, then we still don't know how to process it.
Hmm.
And again, the thing about grief is that the feeling of loss and pain is different with different people and different. So again, it's not like it's not like there's one. manuscript for how to process grief rather. But if you look at children, they don't know how to. We need to help them. But what they will continue to do is they are feeling that loss. And
Mm,
again, we have to look at this as an individual experience for the different children. Your lovely munchkins you described, they were close to your mum, for example, at different levels, and they have different ways and mannerisms and personalities. So again, they will be trying to make sense of it, as a
mm,
better way to look at it. They are trying to make sense of it in their own way. What we now need to do is help them do that, because the child's story is incomplete. They don't know what's happened to grandma, grandpa. They don't really get it.
yeah,
They're making up things in their head. And that's why one of them is asking questions. Help me fill out this story.
yeah.
Another one might be thinking, I don't understand this story. I'm just going to go out and distract myself or do something else.
Mm,
Another one is not even able to ask those questions that are going on in their mind.
mhm,
So the key thing is they're trying to make sense of it. And then we should really come alongside. And the number one thing we want to be doing is communicating with them.
mhm,
That's the key
mhm.
thing. And communication is not us talking, actually, it's us listening.
Wow.
Listening. It really is. That's the level of communication, because we don't want to put our own experience. How you're going through it is not how they're going through it.
Mm, mm,
So as they're trying to work it out and they are maybe talking, or one of them is going out to play, we communicate with the one that's playing with, can I join you in a game? The
mm,
one that's just sitting there and not talking, do you mind if I sit with you?
mm,
The one that's asking questions, this is what I think, this is my answer, what do you think? And
mm.
that kind of way. And it's just meeting them where they are and doing that lovely, I love that nice, flow. I don't know if people can see me, but you
Yeah,
can meet them where they are, and then you kind of, this is what we're doing. That little slow dance or whatever pace they need.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I really like that. I remember one day we had just come back now from the village, or had we even left? I don't remember. And the kids decided they wanted to sleep in her room in her bed. I didn't
Wow.
even want to go near her door because it was too painful. But for them, I
Yeah.
guess they felt close to her because they would do that during holidays, and they were
Mm,
all there, and we would put mattresses on the floor, and they would all sleep on her,
mm,
in her room and whatever,
mm.
and they loved it. They loved it. I mean, they would all try and crawl into her bed. So I guess we do process differently. They wanted to
Mm.
that continuity. Whereas for
Yeah.
us as adults, we're like, there has been a break and it's a permanent
Mm,
disconnect. And
mm.
they're like, we just want to continue that closeness. That relationship hasn't ended for us. So I guess, go
It's
ahead.
it's so interesting what you're saying. It's so many things are running through my mind, but I think we are aware. We're very, very aware. Oh, let me say this, and I think this is a conversation. So let's go with it.
Hmm.
We are very aware of the physical end, because we've got to that stage as adults where, like, yeah, I can see it's ended, and we want to do that. Generally, I'm not saying every single one of us, but with children, they're very, very aware of the unseen, more aware, and they
Mm,
don't see or feel that physical end like we do. It's
mm,
not that they're just trying to keep something alive. It still feels alive in a sense. And the fact of the matter is, I mean, I know we'll go on to other topics, but other questions along this line. But to them, very much the feeling of grandma is so real
yeah,
here. It's not
yeah.
over. So why are we acting like ended? But we, even though that feeling is not over, we're like, right, but I'm going to deal with what I can see on the outside. But actually, hey, are we to be taking a cue from them and enjoying this relationship in a different way? Because it
Oh, wow.
continues.
It does continue. It does continue. That is amazing. You've just unlocked something for me that I've been trying to do. I just didn't realize you've kind of put it into words where I'm trying now to connect back with certain memories and certain experiences with my parents, each one of them individually, and celebrating that. So I'm now trying to
Mm.
continue where they knew all along that it was continuing. So
Yeah.
wow, wow, and
Yeah.
we're apparently our brains are more developed, but maybe that stunts our hearts in a way. I don't know.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, so I read somewhere. I try to. I'm a doer and I'm a fixer.
Mm,
So when my father
mm,
died, I was doing a lot of reading about grief. I read somewhere that a lot of um individuals who lose their parents as adults never actually process that grief.
mm,
And if they died and there was a disconnect in that relationship, they go
mm.
on to become very angry. Like that grief goes on, and a lot of people die with unresolved grief.
Yeah.
So my
Ah, yeah.
question,
Mm, mm, mm,
what are
mm.
the long-term effects in a child of unprocessed or unresolved grief
Oh,
from your experience?
it's just sad and hard. And um, I'll touch on what you said beforehand. And it's a thing of there's a thing when we lose something, we can become stuck,
Yeah.
right? Because the thing is, you're used to a life. Let's think about the life before with the person or whatever it is, a relationship or, something significant to us, the life before. When that thing ends, and especially, I mean, it could be when that thing ends slowly or abruptly or whatever it is, we are now in a position where our brains, quite simply, our brains are trying to return to what we know. It's much
Mm.
easier to return to what we know than to move on
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
and it's just the way the brain works. And so we can stay stuck, and that's the unprocessing, because we want to a part of us is starting to think, like, I need to move on, but then the guilt,
Ah,
sometimes even shame.
oof. Yeah.
I know i know I feel
Yeah.
like there's a lot of reframing that's necessary. None of this is easy, but
Yeah.
it's so necessary.
Yeah.
And again, from experience and all of that, like, so when you talk about the child not processing it, like the way you described unresolved grief and they're living in it, it's just a stuck place.
Mm.
Because one of the things that happens when we lose someone or something significant is that a part, oh man, it's hard to say talk about this, but a part of us,
It's therapy for me, so keep going.
man, a part of us feels lost. There's a part of a loss of
Yes.
identity. I'm no longer a daughter. I'm no longer a son. I'm no
Yeah.
longer, you know what I mean? A part of
Yeah.
how we knew ourselves, when we described ourselves, and some of us saw identity as this, and then that thing's lost. Like I talk about teacher, and
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, if I can't be that again, look, that will be significant for me.
Hmm.
So it's the same thing with child. So again, the children, when there's a loss significant like that, there is a part of their identity, same thing with us adults, that is lost.
Hmm.
And you're now like, how do I re-enter into a new identity?
Yeah.
If I do that, I almost feel like I'm betraying or
Yep.
forgetting the other person.
Yep.
But and I know you asked me, I'll tell you the impact of that, because that's what you asked, really. And the impact of that, as the key thing, is that losing a part of yourself, that not wanting to move on, that stopping your life, in a sense,
It
can
is.
make you, yeah, can make you feel stuck. And if that's going on long term for a child, then it could be that thing of not really paying attention to your needs or what you want, unless you break away from that. But that thing of not processing it can just also spill over into other areas. So let's say, I'll give you one example that might help. When there's a significant loss,
Mm.
you automatically want to protect yourself. So
Yeah.
this is significant loss, yeah. And so a child is thinking, or an adult, whoever is thinking, maybe if I don't do this, if I don't get close to that auntie, If I don't go, then I won't feel so bad if or when she
They
too
died.
dies. Or
Mm.
if I don't go out here, then I too may not be in that situation that person was in when they died. If I don't, so whatever the situation was, maybe if I exercise more, then you become an exercise addict. Whatever it is. And
Mm.
so what then happens in that self-protection mode, we are actually not allowing ourselves to live freely. We are actually being stuck and being affected by survival. We're in survival mode.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not thriving.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I mean, those feelings of guilt, and almost betrayal, uh,
Yeah,
because your life is actually moving on, but
yeah,
they're not here for you to move on
yeah,
with them. They're so huge. So
yeah.
for me, one of the things that I do with the kids,
Mm,
I I want to, obviously I'm not there physically, but there are things that my mother would do with them that,
mm,
not that their parents are not doing with them, but it was really, really
mhm,
special that my mom did with them.
mhm.
So I try to kind of ask about things like that,
Yeah.
and ask if they're doing, have you done this? When was the last time you did this? I'll give you an example. She used to, she loved to teach them to little choruses, and she would sing
Mm,
little songs with them, and she would talk to them about the Bible and about God.
mhm, mhm,
So something that I did recently, I bought each of them a children's Bible, from
mm,
me to them, so that
mm,
they can continue, because that was really important to her. So even
mm,
while she's not here to watch them grow,
mm.
it makes me feel better that I've done something that would have really, really made her
Yeah,
happy to
yeah,
continue in what she had started to teach them.
yeah,
So
yeah. Mm,
I find that making new memories, almost in
mm,
honor of that person,
yeah,
helps to
yeah,
keep their memory alive and to celebrate their life. And I find
yeah.
that the kids are, they're excited to do certain things. They're really excited. I will never replace her, and I'm not trying to, but
Mm-mm,
then it makes me feel closer to her, and it makes
mm,
me feel closer to them through her as
mm.
well.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful because it's creating, as you said, creating new memories, but still in honor of them. And that's there's something I wanted to ask. Again, everything seems hard. It really does. But it's just, this whole thing, and it's something I want someone close to me to say to me or ask me, at such a time, where I'm dealing with this, because we'll all go through it. I know. And is in the right time, in the right place, when we're thinking that guilt and that I don't want to move on, I want to move on, but I feel like I'm leaving my old self and my self with them, and it's like I'm forgetting them. It's
Mm.
just to pause in that gentle way, in a very gentle way. Just pause and think honestly, what would they want you to do? I know.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm a big, big, big champion of
Mhm.
counseling, grief counseling, and of
Yeah,
therapy. And
yeah,
that's the same question I've been asked.
yeah, yeah.
And I got
Okay.
to the point where I needed to deal with that. I needed
Mm,
to deal
mm,
with.
mm,
I remember with my dad, there's a very specific memory. Less than a year after he had passed on, uh, I broke down. I literally was about to lose my mind. I
mm,
couldn't find a single text message from him. And that's because my phone that I was using at the time, because he was unwell for a long time, and that phone broke,
mm,
and I then replaced it, never occurred to me. I then
mm,
replaced that phone. So even pictures that I had taken, like selfies, I'm the selfie kid. I'm that
mm,
child in the house.
mm,
So
mm,
all that was lost. So I woke up about a year later, and I couldn't find a single text message from my father.
mm,
And I lost it, and I was looking hysterically, and I was crying because I felt that it felt like I had that he no longer, that he didn't matter. Logically,
mm.
my brain
Yeah,
knew that
yeah,
that is not
yeah,
true, but
yeah.
my heart was breaking all over again.
Mm,
And
mm,
eventually I
mm, mm,
found a text message, um, a really long one. And it was a very significant conversation that he and I were having. I promise to keep it forever. I don't know where it is today, but oh God. And I'm not going to go through guilt again. I think it would just be nice to
Mm-mm.
read it. But
Yeah,
we also live in a day and age where making memories and keeping them is
yeah,
really, really easy. So for
yeah.
me, I would tell anybody, make memories with the people you love. Keep
Mm,
them, have recordings and pictures and little clips
mm,
and keep them as
mm,
long as you can. Obviously, you're not
mm.
immortalizing them and you're not building a little altar to them, but it helps
Yeah.
to look back. I think with my
Mhm.
mom, I've only looked back at our messages maybe once or twice because I
Yeah,
can't.
yeah.
Maybe I'll be able to do that after this conversation
Mm.
or in a year, but for
Mhm.
now, I'm just
Yeah,
like, I look at her profile on WhatsApp and I open it and then I can't. I can't. To the
yeah,
point, the first time I just cried and cried, turned my phone off and went to sleep. Like turned
yeah,
the phone off, not even closed the messages. The second
yeah.
time I started looking through it and then it was just too painful. I cried and I just kind of went into something else.
Mm.
But we're straying. Let's come back to our munchkins
It's
and
useful,
our
yeah.
teeny tiny tears.
Mm.
How young is too young to have a conversation about life and death?
I think that the conversation will come up. These children will ask. I mean, I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Nothing to do with this podcast, but my son asked me today. And when he asked me, I thought, wow,
Really?
you just said, where'd you go when you die?
How old is he?
He's 11. And this is not the first time he's asked me, but with his 11-year-old self, he's asking me again. They ask if you've got any, they ask all the time. They ask because sometimes they have pets or they have, they see living things all the time. They even, so they do ask. So I don't think it's ever too young. I think that obviously all communication always has to be at the level of the child and
Mhm,
what they can understand. But
mhm.
the important thing is letting them know the truth that at some point we will all move on. So you see my language already. I have,
Yes.
we'll all move on, to a different life or something like that. And just explain that to them in the way they can understand. But the very important thing to do is this: when your child is asking you about it, you want to answer in a way that allows them to give you what they think more. Be
Okay.
so careful about that. You don't want
Okay.
them to ask you and you go, this is what happens, full stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
you want to answer it in a way that you're kind of helping them, you're kind of giving them the chance to say, what do you think? And they say,
Hmm.
I thought they go into the sky and become the clouds. Let them say what they think because they are thinking something. And we don't want
Right.
to shut down what their mind is thinking straight away, because when we do that, it doesn't make them believe what we are now saying. It makes them more confused because what they feel is so real to them.
Yes. 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 Okay. I really like
Yeah.
that. I really
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
And most people wait until something happens. So we are
Yeah.
reactive as opposed to proactive.
I
What's the danger
know.
in that?
The danger in that is that it's happened and there's a lot more emotions and we are grieving at that point and the child is as well, and there's the pressure that you kind of think that you have to actually give a proper answer now, and all that kind of stuff, and things are always better beforehand because then it allows you prepare. It allows the child prepare. I mean, sometimes we don't have that luxury, but it's always
Hmm.
just better beforehand to discuss it. Like, for example, with my children, we might be watching something on TV or saying something, and they're like, "Oh, that's so sad." And I said, "Yeah, it is sad, but we're all going to die, and I don't want it to be." And I say to them, "And I don't want you to be so sad when I go. I want you to enjoy the life that we've lived." And I'm saying that now. They're very young. They're 11 and 8. And I'm saying that, and they look at me. They don't look at me and think, "Yay!" They look at me like, really? I'm like, yeah, we'll miss each other. I'll really miss you. You'll miss me, but I'll always be there. It's just like having that little light conversation whenever it
Okay.
comes up. when you're watching something or when they ask you something, and then my son will say something like, the younger one might say something like, "Oh, mommy, I'll never be able to live without you." And I'll say, "Oh, I know what you mean. You mean you'll miss me a lot, right?" He's like, "Yes." I'm like, "But trust me, you'll miss me so much, maybe even every day, but you will be able to live without me."
Oh,
It's
I
that
like
kind
that.
of thing. Yeah. Acknowledging what they're saying, but also putting a little bit of truth in it. You will go on to be even better than me. You
Mhm.
will go on, but you will miss me and we'll always be together.
Oh,
Something
I
like
love
that.
that. I love that. I love that. Okay. What does comfort look like to a child?
Oh, wow. So it could be anything. It could be anything. It could be anything. It has to be what they are kind of looking for. So a child might just want to sit with you,
Mhm.
and that's comforting.
Mhm.
Hug, as we know, could be comforting. Food could be comforting. You know,
Mhm.
distraction of watching a familiar TV show that you're used to together could be comforting.
Mhm.
Little things, sort of like petting in your hair and all that, but comfort could be anything. It's just soothing. It's
Yeah.
basically a way for the child's nervous system to be regulated, because
Mm,
you need comforting when you are dysregulated, like almost
yes.
like anxious. I don't know what's going on. I don't know how I feel. I'm not sure. So that comfort is just, and somebody that can come alongside them and just help them regulate, even through breathing,
Mhm.
whatever is safe, just the arm around them,
Mm,
listening to them, hearing them,
mm,
validating. One of the most dysregulating things for children is being invalidated, the experience not being validated. Whatever it is the child is feeling as a result of grief, whatever they say they're feeling, I feel nothing. I'm just giving an example. If they say that, that's that's fine.
mhm.
It
Mhm.
might not be true. Maybe they said it because they're trying not to, but then let them express. However, once we start to put words into their feelings or say, "Oh, how can you say that?" Or "How can you still be feeling that?" Or "How can you," or they say something like, "I never want to do anything because, so and so is not here."
Mm,
Don't say, "No, you've got to do stuff." I understand. I understand how it
mhm.
feels to not want to do anything. Sometimes I don't want to do anything. And,
Mhm.
just know that I'm here with you. And when you're ready to do something, we'll go out and do the best thing you want to do. You're not
That's it.
invalidating them. That's it. That's it. And
Oh,
that
I
in
love that.
itself is comforting. Yeah.
And you know what? I actually everything we're talking about applies to adults as well.
Of course. Of
Which brings
course.
me back to that statement that you made that they're just little humans in their
Little
purest
humans.
form. So
Yeah.
everything that we're applying to kids, we can apply to adults as well. In fact,
Absolutely.
we are taught as we grow up, this is how you deal with it, this is how you cope, this is how you
Mm,
validate
mm.
somebody's feelings. I guess we just don't think about it that much with kids
Yeah.
until something happens.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
know.
Okay. Um, I'm going to go to our last question and then I'll come back to the other one that you and I talked about, the big, big one. So for a
Okay.
child, you and I are both Christians. So
Hmm.
we know where our faith comes in, even though you
Yeah.
can go through a season where you have doubt or you feel that your faith is
Yeah.
weak. For a
Yeah.
child, how does faith come in?
I don't know if my answer will be controversial. But I am a big believer in, I don't like to pour things down anybody's throat,
Mhm,
because I feel like if we force things down someone's throat, then there's the bigger chance that they'll vomit.
mhm,
That's what I
mhm,
think. Bring it back up. So faith is a big and very important thing for me, and my children know that and they understand my faith. So, for example, when my 11-year-old asked me, "Where do people go when they die?" I don't know why he asked me that today. I can't tell you what happened. You know, um, I said to him, "Well, as a Christian, I believe," and I told him what I believe, and I said, "Other people believe that nothing happens, that when you die, and other faiths believe that you come back and reincarnated. And I gave him different perspectives because he's 11, and he'd learned some of them in school. And I said, but for me, this is what I believe. I believe that we continue to live on, and we live with a Father who in the first place even sent us in spirit form. So our spirit never dies, it's just our body that dies. I said, this is what I think. And Mommy, and he knows Mommy thinks this. And I said, but
Yes.
you know what? It's very important for you to see how you feel about these different things, and get to a place where you have your own belief. And I always say that to them.
Mm-hmm.
They know what Mommy believes, but it doesn't have to be what they believe. But if
Mm-hmm.
they know what you believe, and that's how you live, and that life is admirable, they're very likely to want to
To follow,
believe that.
yes, yes. You
Exactly.
want to follow in that,
So,
in those.
yeah. And I
Mm,
think that's where the whole faith thing is. And it's very important in that conversation too. I had to ask him, I said, what do you think?
mm-hmm.
What does it feel like for you? Because
Mm,
it's that experience of what they're thinking is so real. The point I'm trying to make is this, right? We're not cardboard, wood, and chalk. I don't know why that came. I'm a teacher. I guess that's why. We are human beings, and if you look at us, we are. And again, as Christians, we can look at ourselves as created and sent by the Father, and we're spirit before we came into this earth, and we believe all that stuff. If you really believe that, then this child, somewhere in his subconscious, in his mind, has an idea of what feels real, of what's going to happen.
right,
Do you see what I mean? So we
right,
can't just chuck something and just walk away. We want to hear from them, because you'd be surprised what you can learn from them, what they'll be saying about this.
right,
You know,
right.
I I remember very clearly when I was a teenager in boarding house, I had a dream of my granddad, and I was watching TV with him. I was
Mm-hmm.
sitting next to him. He was watching TV, and my mum came into the room, and I could only see my back view in the dream. She came into the room and said something like, "Oh, right, are you ready to go? It's time to go." Something like that. I can't remember exactly what she said, to be fair. I'm kind of making that part up. But when she came to see me 2 weeks later, I said to her, "I dreamt of Granddad. I'd never dreamt of him before, and it was quite odd." And she goes, "When did you dream of him?" And I told him, and she goes, "Wow, he died then." You see, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And it's almost like he came to me in my dream to sit with me. We were watching something together. And now that's my memory of him more than anything else, because I didn't live with him or anything like that. And the point I'm trying
Mm-hmm.
to make is that we need to listen to our children. They'll be telling us something. They will
Yeah.
be, seeing something, connecting with something when we're pouring down, because let's be honest, let's be
Mm.
really honest. We have our beliefs, but what do we really know? Let's no, come on now. We don't really, really, really know. And
Mm.
our children can give us some kind of insight, because that dream alone helped my mom feel like, there must be something about life continuing. Because how did he appear in her dream? I was in boarding house miles away.
Right.
You see what I mean? So we need to listen to them, I think.
I like that. I like that. Really, really like that. Incidentally, I had a dream when my grandfather died as well.
Wow.
And I was in boarding school at the time. So, but that's a dream for another for another conversation. So let's talk about this. I I think it was about a year and a half ago. I did a podcast and I interviewed my brother. I think I started with my mom actually, and then I did my brother after. I can't remember. And the reason why I'm bringing this up, my brother is a cancer survivor. So he told us in the podcast, and we've had this conversation over and over. He was diagnosed at 18. It was inoperable. He's, in his 30s. He's a husband. He's a father. So,
Wow.
but during the podcast, one of the things I asked him was, I can't remember the exact question, but I was asking, how do you, what would you say to families, something like that. And he said a lot of times when he would look in our eyes, he would feel like he was already a goner. He would feel like he was
Wow.
already dead because of our reaction and our fear and our expressions on our face, and our sorrow and our shock. He was the one going through it, but we were also going through it. And then when I interviewed my mom, we talked about it as well, about her experience as a mother. This is her last born, only
Mm,
son, diagnosed with cancer at
mm,
18 when his life should be starting. And she
mm.
talked about her experience as a mother, and the feeling of hopelessness, to the point where one day she just told God, I can't watch him go through this anymore. If this is going to be it, then I just don't want him to be in pain. And for him, it was like he decided he was going to live. He decided
Yes.
that that this thing was not going to define him. This is during the treatment and then even after, and he's living his life. So back to my question. So for
Mm.
anybody who has not listened to those two podcasts, they are there, and I will try and link them in the bio down here.
Yeah.
So my
Yeah.
question is,
Wow.
what about a child, for example, facing a terminal illness? How do you interact with them? Now, I know you had your reservations about this question,
Mm.
and I
It's
would like
so
you to
heavy.
raise
Yeah.
those reservations. But then, just from your
Mm.
experience, what would you say?
Yeah, it's such a big question, and anyone listening who's going through that, honestly, it's one of those things that, quite frankly, unless you are going through it, as a child, a sibling, a parent, you can't really understand it. And that was one of my reservations from it, because I understand things like this from working with children and all that professional side, but we have to be very sensitive and aware of the fact that people, at least you have the experience, but then of your brother having cancer, but someone who's going through a terminal illness is a whole different thing, because you kind of feel that that's it.
Hmm.
But one thing I know, which is an important reminder for all of us, is that the most important way to live is in the moment, in the present. It really, really is.
Hmm.
Because you can look at all of us as, at some point, we are. Death is inevitable,
Yes,
physical death.
yes.
So whether it's through a diagnosis, which I know we don't want, or whatever it's going to happen. But if we can, in that moment, enjoy every moment, just like your brother is doing, and talked about, I love what you said, that he explained, I just want to live, and he knew at that point, I'm alive. So if anyone's looking at me like I'm already gone, it doesn't feel right, because I know I'm alive. And I
Mm,
think the most important thing for all of us is just making, and to be honest, this conversation, or what I'm saying right now, I don't think I'm saying it to parents of who have children with terminal, because I think they know this.
hmm.
Oh, I
Mm,
think they do, because when you're faced with that, you are more aware of
yeah.
the present, and making memories, and keeping memories, and enjoying moments, and going out and doing things. And I
Hmm.
think it's more for the rest of us who are watching people who have a child and all that, just knowing that, enjoying and celebrating the present with them, rather than treating them as if the future has already come,
Mm,
or something like that,
I
is
like that.
so crucial. It's the same thing with grief. It's the same thing actually with grief. Even if you're not dealing with, if when we lose someone, a lot of times, one of the most painful things, and I don't know whether you'd resonate with this, but one of the painful things that happens when we lose someone or something is the loss of what could have been if they still were here. The
Oh,
future.
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
I am the
yeah,
choir, preach to
yeah.
me.
I know. And I think that's what messes with our minds more than anything else.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
sometimes we think it's regret of what I could have done in the past. No, but that regret is because you're thinking, what could have been? What
yeah.
could have been in the future? How would they have done this with me? Those future things. And you see, that's why we're in such turmoil, because we live our best selves and highest selves in the present.
Right.
So if we can, in those moments, yes, go through and be kind and patient with ourselves when we realize we're doing that, but just bring ourselves back to now and right now. In fact, because we know we're all going to go through death, it means that life must be lived. And
Mm,
anybody who's gone through death is looking at us on this side of reality. By the way, they're enjoying a great time on the other side. That's what I
Yep.
think anyway.
Yep. Yep.
But they're looking at us and saying, hey, you are there. Enjoy this in
Yeah.
honor of me. I'm waiting for you on the other side. So much easier said than done. But if we can somehow hold on to that, and I'm saying this to myself as well, that I want to cry. There's nothing crying, there's nothing wrong with that. But I want to also not sit in the guilt of not living fully,
Mm, mm,
because they want that. They want you to
yeah.
re-enter your life in your new identity, because you will have a new identity when you've lost it. And actually, that new identity is not necessarily a bad one. In fact, it's
No.
not.
No.
And the relationship with them doesn't have to end. It continues in your new self with the new
Yes.
memories. And
Yes.
see what I'm doing. Look at me, daddy. Look at what I'm doing. I know that you're so proud. Oh my gosh, mom, look at where I am now. The relationship continues.
Yeah, yeah. It's really, really interesting you say that in those exact words. I said that this week. I graduated. Well, I went back to
Wow.
school, finished a course, graduated, or rather got my results this week. The certificate is
Wow.
coming. And I was like, oh God, you guys would be so proud of me.
Yes.
And I actually said that. I was like, look at my grades. You guys would be so proud of me. So
Yes.
it's interesting
Absolutely.
that you said it in those exact words. And for me, it's
Mm.
important to talk as if they were here. Sometimes I'll look at their pictures,
Yeah.
like I'm currently not in my house in Rome. I'm in Dakar, but I have a picture of each one of them, and sometimes I look and be like, you guys, this was not the plan, right? This is hard, right? And I
Yeah.
do have those conversations,
Yeah.
understanding that they're not physically here. And again, not
Yeah.
building an altar and getting stuck in
Mm,
this place,
mm,
but
mm,
then just feeling a sense of comfort from knowing that they would have got it. If they were here, they'd have been like, yeah,
mm.
we know this was not the plan, but you're good. That
Yeah.
we raised you well and we're proud of you and you're
Yes.
stronger than you think and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. So beautiful.
Okay, so parting shot. Anything you want to say? Absolutely anything. What is a parting shot you want to give us?
I think just going back to our lovely children, and as much as possible, if there is any kind of sickness or, a family member that's unwell or anything, not to keep any of that from them.
Hmm.
It's so because, and the reason why I'm stressing that is because they are feeling it anyway. So it's
Hmm.
kind of, I know it sounds harsh, but it's kind of a form of gaslighting, really, when you're feeling something, but the adults that you love around you are telling you, no, 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 it's fine.
It's
It's
fine. It's
fine.
fine.
Yeah,
He's fine. He's fine.
yeah, and you just know. So it's helping them understand what's going on in the way that you can, preparing them, explaining to them, helping them be a part of it as much as possible. Because and this is because they are, let's say it's in the family home. This is what's going on. Daddy's going through this, we are going to do that, and all that kind of stuff, and just letting them be a part of it. And making sure that that communication carries on when it does happen, and
Hmm.
after, over and over, as much and in the ways that they want to talk about it. So
Okay.
because the way in which they want to talk about it, they're processing it in that way and helping them. I think another important thing is to, you mentioned, I forgot to say this when you mentioned about maybe, one of your lovely munchkins who may not speak as much. Brilliant. You sit with them, you might want to do some art. You'd be surprised what comes out. And
Hmm.
this is just such a good way. I think people can, children, with children, it's lots of play, art, more than talking, and music and all that kind of stuff. But
Hmm.
one thing I want to just also mention is this: things don't have to remain exactly the same. And I'm
Hmm.
not saying that we should rush into the new, but when the person that's close to us passes away, I think that there's space for a conversation with the people in the home or in the vicinity, or including the children, and saying, right, this is what life is now going to be like,
Oh, wow.
with something like, because it's happening. They are
Mm,
wondering, they are dealing with the loss we just described, the loss of what would I have done, it could have been like this, the future.
mm,
So helping them see this is what life is going to be like.
mm,
Grandma, granddad isn't here now. but I
Mm,
know that they're always with us. We are
mm,
going to do so we're going to do X, Y, and Z. We're going to
mhm.
go on certain adventures every Monday or whatever it is. We are
Yeah.
going to do this. What would you like us to do? It might be something as subtle as, oh, I don't want to, let me say it. It might be something as subtle as we are going to change the carpet. We're
Mm,
going to move the furniture so things look
mhm.
slightly different. It has to be when people are ready. But the point I'm trying to
Yeah.
make is helping them see that we are continuing to live as we
Mm,
go through this. It might be painting a wall. It might
mhm.
be something that making the place not transform. It has to be subtle, but it looks slightly different. You can be different as you walk into this place. It's okay to move on because that guilt, when people feel ready to move on but they can't, it's also very difficult for children. And if they're
Mm.
ready to move on with the person and you look stuck, then they feel very guilty because they're
Yes.
waiting for
So
you
you
to move.
pass on
So
your guilt to them.
you do. So very important. You're trying to move with them. Subtle, subtle, subtle steps. Let's say, the grandma or the husband or whoever it is had shoes at the front door. We say, okay, we're now going to remove the shoes. And the
Mm,
shoes are now going to go in the back. Now the
mhm.
front is going to have a flower vase. It's not going to have shoes anymore. Those
Okay.
kind of subtle
Just subtle little
changes.
changes. Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay, we're going to turn grandma's room. It's still going to have her desk, but it's not going to have her bed. We're going to move the bed out. Just subtle together, just little thing. I'm giving examples, but people will be able to come up with the best thing that they can work with together so they can
Yeah.
see that we are moving on baby steps together and you don't have to feel guilty if you're ready to move on and I'm not, and you don't have to be stuck.
Right, right. I love that. I mean, I like what you mentioned about let's do an art project. That brings me
Yeah.
almost back to my brother, and there's an organization that he runs called Hope for Cancer Kids. And every
Wow.
Thursday, I think it's every Thursday, they do art therapy with these kids in the cancer
Wow.
ward. And it's
Wow.
just that they go in and they have all these
Wow.
art equipment and they paint and they draw and they,
Wow.
make beautiful little things, and it helps the kids to feel normal. So I
Yes.
like what you said about that. I like what you said about that.
Mm,
I think my
mm.
parting shot would be deal with you and your grief and your issues
Yes,
so that you do not
absolutely.
pass them on to your kids.
I
I
love
like I
that.
said, I'm a big proponent of go for therapy. Go,
Yeah.
go. And now I understand that not everybody is there, but
Mm,
it has helped me. I did it when I lost dad. I did it when we lost mom as well. It has really helped me to be able to understand how I cope with grief.
mm,
It has helped me to be
mm,
able to understand how I don't cope with grief. I help me to
mm,
to be able to understand when I'm trying to control a situation because the change scares me,
mm.
because change
Yeah.
is, I link it back to the grief. It has helped me
Mm,
to deal with anxiety,
yeah.
anxiety of moving on, anxiety of new places
Mm,
and things and people.
mm,
So for me, it is I pray that I'm dealing with it. Well, I know that I'm
mm,
doing my best to deal with it. But I pray that it is so that I do not pass it on to other people.
mm,
And I
mm.
say this a lot, which is a weird statement. I say that I feel like I've matured in grief. I
Yeah.
said it to a friend of mine this week who less than a year ago lost his wife and is now raising his two boys
Wow.
by himself and really really struggle. Well, he's not struggling
Wow.
anymore, but initially there was a challenge with with the family, and there's just been a lot, and he decided that he needed to live for his boys. That was what woke him up every morning,
Mm,
and then he
mm.
decided he needed to live for himself as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he says there's nothing wrong with that statement. Maturing in
Yeah.
grief simply means that you've
Yeah.
experienced grief, uh, close grief, sometimes more than once, sometimes in close proximity, sometimes in such a traumatizing way,
Hmm.
and you then learn. So I know the things that I did when I lost dad and the things I did when I lost
Mm,
mom,
mm,
that are different in terms of coping.
mm,
So for me,
mm.
it's deal with your stuff so
Yeah.
that you don't pass your stuff on to your kids. so that
Mm,
they're not
mm,
dealing with this 20 years from today and passing it on to
mm,
their kids and their kids,
mm,
stuff like that. So
mm,
yeah,
mm.
that would be my parting shot.
Oh, honestly, I could chat to you forever. Thank you so much
I
for sharing your
know.
experience.
Thank you. Where can you be found if somebody wanted to reach out to you?
So a good place to start would be Instagram with my name, Ebiere.bolu, Bolu, Ebiere.bolu on Instagram, but also my website, raisingyourchildonpurpose.com, and everything's there. Oh,
Raisingyourchildonpurpose.com. I love
dot com.
that. I love that. I just, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, sis. Thank you so much. And to our
Thank you so
viewers,
much.
this has been a really, really, really insightful, educational, sometimes teary conversation. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I'd like you guys to engage with us. Let us know what stood out for you. Let us know if you want to reach out just for a conversation. I'm available. You've heard
Yes.
where Ebiere can be found. I can be found on Instagram, Bev Chahonyo, and on Facebook, Beverly Chahonyo. And here on YouTube and on this podcast. The podcast name is Beverly Speaks. It is available on all major podcast platforms, and we are back in video. So I feel like this is another achievement for the year. I have done something that I was intending to do. I will sign off by
Lovely.
saying thank you, thank you, thank you so much for joining us, Ebiere. Thank you for opening up your heart and speaking to us. And to my audience, thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for coming back. And remember now, remember always, you are loved and you are enough. God bless you. God keep you. God cause his face to shine upon you. Bye.
Bye.